Hello, and welcome to the Affordable Housing Insights Fireside Chat Series. I'm Wendy Penn, Associate Vice President of Affordable Housing Initiatives at the Mortgage Bankers Association. In this series, my colleagues and I talk to industry leaders about the work they're doing to increase affordable homeownership and rental opportunities. We also get to know our guests a bit better by finding out why this work is so important to them. I'm excited to welcome Federal Housing Commissioner Julia Gordon. Commissioner Gordon, thank you for talking with me today.
It's my pleasure. Really excited about this.
Thank you. You were confirmed in your role in May of 2022. And here we are 2 years later. And as you think back over the past 2 years, what do you consider to be some of your key accomplishments?
Well, thanks for that question. And I'm just struck by hearing 2 years out loud. It feels more like it's been 10 years, but it's been a very action-packed 2 years, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Um, this team has accomplished so much. Even before I got here, they hit the ground running during a pandemic, making sure that homeowners and renters across the country knew that the government had their back during a very, very difficult time. And, you know, I'm so proud of that work. I came in toward the tail end of some of that. But to me, the efforts that the federal government made were the best reason why any of us want to be here. In my time here, I had a few priorities as we began to come out of the pandemic. And one of those priorities was making sure that any of our homeowners who had taken a COVID forbearance had a way to get back into performing on their loan that fit their new circumstances or what might have been their changed circumstances. And so for us, I think an incredibly important area of work has been first continuing the COVID waterfall suite of loss mitigation options, but then recognizing that macroeconomic conditions changed. In particular, we had a steep and rapid increase in interest rates and correspondingly in mortgage rates. And we found that some of the traditional ways that we were doing loss mitigation, particularly in terms of adjusting a borrower's rate and term, was no longer resulting in payment reduction. And we know that payment reduction for borrowers with the hardship is really the secret sauce. It's the key to keeping them sustainably in that modification. And so this team, as soon as circumstances changed, began to think outside the box about what can we do to continue to provide borrowers with a hardship with a solution that works in today's circumstances. And so the rollout of the payment supplement partial claim solution, which, as you may know, is a temporary 3-year monthly payment reduction using partial claim funds, rolling that out was an enormous lift. We had to invent it from scratch. We had to work through our statutory and regulatory framework to make sure we could fit it in. We had to work very closely with servicers to make sure they could administer it. And we did all of that while we were still, running the loss mitigation options that we had. And so getting that out earlier this year was a big milestone for us. We've had incredible success keeping people in their homes post-pandemic, and I think that this tool is going to help us continue on that trajectory. I would say another key accomplishment, of course, is the reduction of the mortgage insurance premium. And that was not just a symbolic reduction. We reduced that premium by more than a third. And at a time where really nobody's dropping the price for anything else. And we were able to do that because the fund has been very well managed and we are continuing to manage it prudently and conservatively. But we saw that we continued to have an ability to make further cuts. And so managing through that process was, to be honest, not quite as straightforward as I thought it would be before I came to this job. There was an intersection with the budget process that was lengthy and complicated and not really well spelled out in any statute or regulation. And so managing to get that cut through was both a very personal achievement for my team, but we've already been able to see in the last year that this cut has helped about 682,000 borrowers save an average of close to $900 just in the first year of their mortgage. If you do the math, that's close to $600 million saved. And that's just so exciting. I could go on about all sorts of other accomplishments, particularly the new focus on manufactured housing, our role with the PAVE task force trying to remove appraisal bias from the marketplace, creating a first look for owner occupants in all of the different FHA disposition channels. There's a lot this team has gotten done in the last couple of years.
Those are certainly things to be proud of. And just listening to that, I see why it feels like more than 2 years. It's quite a bit of work. Um, you've held a number of leadership positions throughout your career, and really with your credentials would have been well suited for any number of roles. But what was it about the role of commissioner that really appealed to you, and how did those previous roles prepare you for the job?
So, as you may know, I worked on the Biden Harris transition team, where I was on the team that looked at FHA and FHFA. And it's typical when you're on the transition team, you often know that there will probably be a job offer somewhere. And when I started having conversations with people, and they said, well, here's the type of jobs we think you might be suited for, there was never a doubt in my mind. There was only one job I had an interest in, and it was this one, because I have always believed that FHA does not get the attention and respect and credit that it deserves for the way it opens doors for people who don't fit the conventional market's requirements. And my entire career has been focused on underserved communities, people who don't have wealth, people who may have lower incomes. And all of that work together just flowed so naturally into what FHA's core mission is. And, I've worked as an attorney. I was actually at one point a housing attorney in legal aid where I worked on landlord tenant issues. Of course, working as a consumer attorney in the predatory lending and foreclosure prevention space, working as a policy leader at the Center for American Progress, and then leading a nonprofit, the National Community Stabilization Trust, that actually worked in communities on single family development. It just all led here, and I feel like every day I pull from one or more of those experiences in doing this job. Um, I do want to mention something else though, because we all have those people in our career who we look to, people who were mentors, people who gave us opportunities. And I have many of those people, far too many to mention here, although I will say I've been lucky enough to work very closely with some of them in this position. But there was one person in particular who I'll name drop because everybody knows him, Joe Venturone. Um, and Joe said to me years ago, he said, you'd make a good FHA commissioner. And for those of us who have not spent our entire lives in this particular field, and frankly, for those of us who are women sometimes in this field, we don't always think about what is possible for us to accomplish until somebody else helps us think of that. And so I always credit Joe for this one.
So yes, that was a really good name drop. And small world, Joe Ventrone actually hired me in a previous life, and that's how my housing career started. So it's we have that in common. That influence from Joe, I would say, we have a common theme there. One of the things, as you talk about your previous roles, that I hear as a thread, as a common thread, is about collaboration and the need for collaboration. And clearly that continues to be the case now. And certainly at MBA, we appreciate how closely you and your team work with us. And something that we get a lot of good feedback from our members about is the drafting table and the benefits of being able to use that to really work through some complex and implement complex changes. And it's been certainly a hallmark of your tenure there as commissioner. Can you talk a little bit about what you see as the value of collaboration and how you engage stakeholders?
Sure, that's a great question because collaboration is so important to me because my whole career I'm only smart with other people. I'm not, there are people who can go in a room with themselves and a computer and really incredible things happen as a result. That's never been my style. I like to find who the greatest thinkers are, bring them together, and see how much we can accomplish as a group, bouncing off of each other and taking an idea and moving to the next level with it. And when I came to government, I'll be honest with you, government sometimes has a reputation of just going off in a room and doing something by itself. And I've spent most of my career outside of government. So I know what it's like when someone drops this policy out there and you think, wow, I can't believe they didn't call me about this. And I never wanted to do that. And so at FHA, we were fortunate enough to already have the ability to use this particular tool, the drafting table. And it was being used, but not with great regularity for everything. And I just kind of feel, why would we not have a better policy result if we let the stakeholders and the people who have to implement this policy have some input before we finalize it? And because at FHA, most of what we do isn't necessarily APA rulemaking with, the notice and comment period. It's this sub-regulatory guidance and working on our handbook and the like. So using the drafting table for that has been an incredible way to make sure that when policy is finalized, the industry feels that it fits, available resources and that it can just move forward quickly. And I've been so grateful for all the input that we've gotten. We get input from lenders and servicers and consumer advocates and think tanks. It's a really wonderful way to optimize what it is that we're doing.
Yeah, that's great. And again, it's certainly one of the things that our members appreciate. And so we are grateful for that. I want to shift a little bit to multifamily housing and talk to you a bit about what efforts are underway to make sure FHA can continue to be a viable funding option, given some of the recent declines and how it's been used in the multifamily space.
But thanks so much. And, for me, the multifamily has been, well, I've worked on multifamily issues before. Delving into them the way I have in this position has been a wonderful education. I've gotten to meet a whole new group of partners, and we've been really excited about our role. It's been a tough time out there, right? It's been a tough time for everybody. Volume is down everywhere. Business can be slow in the environment that we're in, but FHA has continued to remain that important source of countercyclical liquidity. And so our volume doesn't quite go down as much as it does market wide. And, in this fiscal year through March, we have 175 closed endorsements for a UPB of, a little over 3 million. And, um, the previous year was 304 closed endorsements. So we're still doing a lot of work, and there's definitely a role in policy change in making sure we can continue to serve that role in the industry. So, for example, we increased the large loan threshold, which, as you know, separates uh, kind of a normal underwriting process from something that's more complex. And we increased that threshold from 75 million to 120 million. That's a big jump. It was the first update since 2014. And I felt really strongly about getting that done. And maybe not at quite the scale of that, but eliminating the dollar cap on transactions going through the LIHTC pilot program, removing the duplicative assurance on completion requirement, providing more flexibility, such as for dispersing surplus cash, stuff like that is what continues to let FHA serve the market in both good times and bad.
It sounds like you and your team will be busy. So speaking of your team, I've heard you talk many times at MBA meetings or other industry events or even just smaller group settings. And you always make a point of recognizing your team and acknowledging the work that they do. Why is it so important to you as a leader to make sure you do that in those settings?
So, government work is a team sport. Nobody accomplishes anything here alone. And we're here with a very ambitious agenda. And so I feel that it's really important to recognize that it takes a village to make that agenda happen. We have teams all over the country, um, in our Hawks, in our regional offices, as well as here at headquarters. The Office of Housing has like 2,700 people, and every one of those people has an area of expertise and a role that we couldn't accomplish anything if they weren't doing it. And it feels so important to me to recognize the expertise and the dedication of all of the people it takes to serve the mission that we want to serve and to work with our partners in the transparent and close and productive way that we want to.
At the beginning of our conversation, I mentioned, or at the intro of our conversation, I mentioned that one of the things we like to do in our chat series is to find out why the work is so important to our guests. And you've touched on that a little bit, and you've shared some of your previous roles. But in closing, I would love to hear from you about why this is the journey you chose. Why is housing why what you've dedicated your life's work to?
Well, thanks for that question. And I have a lot of personal connections to this issue. I also have a strong commitment to the notion that for people to have safe, decent, and affordable housing is the precondition for everything else that folks can accomplish. That is the building block, the platform for better health outcomes, better educational outcomes, better safety outcomes, stability, um, economic mobility, more choices for the next generation. And so I feel like everybody here at HUD is committed to that mission because none of us comes here for the glamour and the paycheck. Um, I don't know if you've ever been to the Weaver building, but the glamour quotient here is very low. I cannot see the Capitol from my office. I can mostly see more things made out of concrete. But everybody here shares this mission, and I really enjoy being part of a team like that. Just sharing this commitment, trying to get things right, um, and trying to make sure that everybody in the country has the opportunities that so many of us here have had. I will, I think I've said this lots of times before in speeches, but my parents did not own a house. And I grew up in, what we now call single family rental. I just called it rental when I was growing up. And we sometimes had to move just because the person who owned the house had other plans for it. I think one time we had to move for the reason of maybe my dad didn't pay the rent. And that was tough as a kid, just having to pick up and move a bunch of times. And so I really have a strong feeling about that, but also much more specifically when when my mom was older and was a renter, didn't own a home, and started to have some trouble um, getting around and everything. She moved down from Connecticut to be here closer to me. And I live in a super unaffordable place. And I was really lucky that my mom moved down here because when she moved down, I had just had my first child, but my only child, for those of you keeping score. And I don't honestly know how anybody does that without family nearby. It's incredibly difficult to have, a busy career and also raise children. And my mom was able to move here and meet both her needs and help with my needs because she was able to move into subsidized senior housing. And so the fact that I now get to have a role in strengthening subsidized senior housing among many others is so meaningful to me every single day. My team knows I do a lot of visits around the country and I visit a lot of buildings, but there's nothing I like to visit more than our Section 202 properties, which are senior housing, where I go in and it feels like everybody's my mom. Um, and so this job has been such a blessing and an honor. And I'm so glad that you gave me the opportunity to talk about it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I appreciate you giving us some of that insight. And congratulations on your 2-year mark as commissioner. We certainly appreciate all that you and your team do and for being such a tremendous partner to the Mortgage Bankers Association and to the industry. And I look forward to more great things before the end of the year and beyond, perhaps. So thank you again for joining me today. And thank you to all of you who tuned in today to today's Affordable Housing Insights Fireside Chat.